Welcome to the show and Happy New Year. Hard to believe it's 2018. This is our first show of 2018, and we're going to do things a little bit different. Instead of our usual features, we're going to get right into with our guest this week. We're talking a little bit of politics, and then later on the show, a little bit of football. Especially we'll talk about the bowl season that's just been and the championship game that's coming up, and then also the NFL playoffs. But first, my guest this week is Chris Regan, my good friend, law partner, and former vice chairman of the West Virginia Democratic Party. We're going to talk a little bit about the year in review of 2017 politics and what we might expect in 2018. Chris, good to be here.
Hey, it's great to be here, Jamie. And what a quiet year we had in 2017. I'm sure it'll be pretty much the same in 18. Maybe just move on to sports.
Really, it's certainly been a rocky year in the world of politics. And let's start off maybe at the national level and talk about some of the federal politics. Of course, you know, Donald Trump now just almost a year into his presidency. January 20th will be a year, and quite a turbulent first year. A lot of shakeup, people in and out of the administration, and of course now a lot of noise with North Korea. There's been throughout the past year, but let's talk a little bit about what we've seen in 2017 and what we might expect in 18.
Well, I think probably the most significant thing is the substantive change in the Republicans losing a Senate seat in Alabama, a deep, deep red state, shaving their margin to just one vote in the Senate. Now, I mean, you can talk about Trump's tweets all day. You can talk about his fake news media awards that are coming out this week. I can't believe I'm plugging Donald Trump's fake news media awards. He's the president of the United States. But that stuff's all sort of the riot that's on TV all the time. In reality, who controls the Congress is the most meaningful thing in politics right now, because as long as the Republicans control it, they will not investigate Donald Trump's finances, his tax returns, these issues. If those chambers flip at the end of 2018, that could make all the difference in the world in terms of how long his presidency lasts, what kind of agenda items he can get done. So the fact that a deep Republican state like Alabama flipped its Senate seat to the Democrats, that's the most significant recent development.
Well, what do you think, Chris, in terms of, you know, in that Alabama race, of course, there were these allegations of sexual misconduct on the part of the Republican candidate, and you know, how much did that play into the results as opposed to people wanting to see change and maybe some shift to the Democratic Party there in a traditionally red state?
Well, certainly the unpalatable nature of Roy Moore's behavior with these young teenage women, even though it was alleged to be 30 or 40 years ago that it occurred, played a big role in that loss. But also, you saw a lot of voters in suburban areas who would normally vote Republican in Alabama and pile up a 30 or 40 point margin. When Jeff Sessions won that seat, he didn't even have an opponent. Coming out and being willing to vote Democratic or not voting at all, whereas you saw tremendously energetic turnout among the relatively small Democratic base that exists in Alabama. And that is what combined for the Jones win. Now, we may see that again as the soap opera aspects of the Trump administration continue and things don't really get done to help the so-called forgotten man who propelled Trump to the presidency. His voters may start to stay home. We may find that Trumpism doesn't generate any electoral activity without Trump being on the ballot, as he won't be in 2018. And that could spell disaster for the Republicans in the congressional elections.
You know, people have also looked at and pointed to Virginia and what happened there with respect to race there as, you know, further evidence that perhaps, you know, the Democrats could have a big year in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, you know, 15 seats, I think, almost the majority now in the House of Delegates, which they thought might never go Democratic again in Virginia, simply because, very much like the country, Virginia's cut up between some urban areas that have a number of districts, but then a vast rural hinterland that has a controlling number of districts, or did, up to just one. Now they're going to come down to a coin flip on their very last election to see whether it will be a 50-50 House of Delegates in Virginia or Republican control if they win the toss. So, I mean, it's kind of, we come right out of bowl season. Here we go. We got a coin toss deciding control of an entire legislative chamber. So, you know, does that spill over into West Virginia? Do we see it in other states, whereas, as we know right now, we have Republican governors everywhere, Republican legislatures almost everywhere, 30 states plus. But a lot of those could be shifting in 2018, which has tremendous long-term consequences because of redistricting and the census in 2020.
You know, let's talk a little bit about, you know, of course, 2018, as you've alluded to, an election year nationally and what that means, but also, you know, what can we expect, you know, if it's even possible to tell what you can expect from President Trump in 2018? How does this tax code change affect things, and affect his ability to govern going forward? Is that a major victory for him that allows him to now, be a little bit emboldened with respect to his agenda, or does it perhaps not have any effect at all?
Well, I mean, two things came out very recently that I think speak to that issue, especially in West Virginia. One was President Trump saying about a week ago that he had done tremendous things for West Virginia, and West Virginia was doing fantastically now. And then a report which came out just 2 days ago saying that the unemployment rate was up in every single one of West Virginia's 55 counties. So you have that strange disconnect where Trump feels like he's taken care of West Virginia, he's solved our problems, and now we're doing fantastically in his mind, whereas here in West Virginia, we are still waiting for help to arrive. Now, those tax changes that you mentioned, they may have tremendous benefits for corporations and for people who are billionaires, like our own governor, that Trump famously got to switch to the Republican Party in the summer. Well, now he's been paid back in spades because the tax cut package is worth hundreds of millions of dollars to somebody like Jim Justice, but it's worth very minimal amounts or even perhaps negative amounts to the average West Virginian. And as we get into next year, when the Republicans have said it's their plan to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, or push those programs off on the states, that could mean even bigger problems here. But all the while, the president is saying he took care of it for us. So what I've been looking to see is, there's a small core of people who never would be turned away from Trump, his true hardcore base. But I mean, there's a lot more people in West Virginia than his hardcore base who voted for him. And I think they are not seeing the results that they expected from this administration. They're seeing more of the drama, more of the tweeting, not so much some kind of real economic turnaround that benefits all West Virginians. So that is what people will be looking at going into 18. How does that middle third of the electorate, that in West Virginia, Trump got them all, but does he get them again for whatever candidates he's supporting, such as Morrissey in 2018?
Well, speaking of West Virginia politics, let's talk a little bit about that. We need to take a break, so as soon as we come back, we'll focus on West Virginia politics, maybe even a little bit of local politics. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
I witnessed him have 2 heart attacks in ICU. He went through seizures.
We'd much rather have Aaron like this than dead. A lot of parents don't have that luxury.
He can't talk. He can't walk. This is a condition Aaron will live with for the rest of his life because he abused prescription pills.
Mind your meds. Learn more from the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
Welcome back to the show. I've been speaking with my guest this week, my good friend, law partner, and also former Vice Chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party, Chris Regan. And we were talking national politics, Chris, but let's turn to statewide politics now, and maybe what happened in 2017, what we might expect in 2018, where the entire House of Delegates, of course, will be up for election and half the Senate.
Right. Our House of Delegates, every 2 years, of course, our delegates stand for election. Half the Senate, because they stand every 4 years for election. And so will there be a change, like a sea change like they saw in Virginia? Currently, it's about the same deficit in the House of Delegates. They need about 15 to 16 seats to take over. The Democrats would, and then the Senate, they'd need 7. They'd need 7. But that's very challenging for them because this is sort of the second wave in a row. So the Democrats have a lot of really entrenched candidates that they would be up against in terms of their flips, and they're going to have to defend some newly vulnerable senators, some senators who've never defended against the new Trump wave.
Yeah, you look at the makeup of the Senate and the House both being Republican, really the first time in decades and decades. I mean, before any of us were really born, these last couple of sessions here. I think the big question, this is an important session that's just starting here in January for the Republican-controlled House and Senate in West Virginia, because they are going to have to be on the ballot. And one of the things the voters will be asking is, all right, what have you done since you've taken over? And have we given you enough time in order to do what you said you would do?
Right, and so far it's interesting because the first several sessions of Republican rule in the West Virginia legislature have been dominated by two things. Number one, the budget crisis, and the West Virginia just simply doesn't have the money it needs to keep funding its projects at even the existing levels. And number two, tax cuts. First, Bill Cole had a whole series of tax cuts he wanted to pass in the 14 and 16 sessions, and now Mitch Carmichael is in charge, and he is talking about repealing taxes that currently exist, such as the business inventory tax. And the big issue with that is, where's the money going to come from? Because we're already in deficit situations year after year because tax revenue is not keeping up with the needs of the state. And so we've been talking in session after session about cutting WVU, cutting funding for Marshall, cutting funding for our healthcare programs, cutting programs like Medicaid, and all of those decreases really hurt people. But the Republican priority is tax cuts, and you're going to cut those taxes, you got to find the money somewhere. So once again, they'll be down in Charleston for 2 months trying to find money to fund tax cuts. And how will people react to that? I mean, generally the idea of tax cutting is politically popular. You don't see politicians running saying, I'm going to raise taxes. But on the other hand, it's 3 sessions in a row now that they're trying to cut taxes at the same time as they're also cutting funding for things that we rely on in West Virginia to just get by in life, like particularly the Medicaid program. So that conflict comes once again.
You know, turning to Governor Justice, in office a year now, and like President Trump, who is kind of hanging his hat a little bit on the thing he can hang his hat on, which is his tax code passing. Governor Justice perhaps hanging his hat on the fact of this road bond issue that he was able to get through in the special election last fall, and what does that mean for him going forward? And of course, the big news with him in the last year was the flip from being elected as a Democratic governor to flipping to the Republican Party shortly after taking office.
It was jobs, jobs, jobs. Jobs, 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 and a rocket ride, an economic rocket ride. Those were the Jim Justice promises, and they carried him to victory. But as indicated, I mean, just last week, or within the last couple of days, it came out. Unemployment is up in every single county in West Virginia. And that's at a time when unemployment is falling nationwide. So we are literally 51st out of all 50 states and Washington, D.C. in terms of unemployment, because we're actually losing jobs while other states are gaining them. We are losing population while other states are gaining population. And obviously we have immigration in this country, so it's not, very few states are losing population, but we're one of them. We're going to lose one of our congressional seats because of that loss in population unless there's a dramatic change in that. So Jim Justice is presiding over a state that by most indicators is not doing very well. But we will see if the voters hold his party, his new party, accountable for that at the ballot box.
You mentioned the congressional seats, and of course, those seats in Congress up in 2018. As you mentioned, after the 2020 census, that could change, going forward in 2022 and others. But let's talk about the 2018 election, particularly here in the 1st Congressional District, a race between incumbent David McKinley on the Republican side, and then a couple of people, maybe 3 or more, going to be vying for the Democratic seat, including Wheeling resident Ralph Baxter, a law professor from WVU, also running. Mike Mennypenny saying he's probably going to run again, but an interesting race shaping up there, because perhaps the first time in a number of years that Congressman McKinley has had a viable challenger.
That's right, and that is the key, is a viable challenger, which is something that Ralph Baxter certainly presents because of his extremely successful career in law, not just here, but around the country, and actual success as a job creator in bringing jobs to Wheeling with the ORIC program. So he's giving McKinley something he hasn't seen before with the Mennypenny campaign, which was really strapped for cash and resources last time around, and even with Sue Thorne's campaign a couple of years ago, that equally did not have the kind of oomph that Ralph Baxter is probably going to be able to generate. And so the big question that McKinley's going to have to answer is, what has he done for us now? 3-4 terms there in the Congress, what improvements here in the 1st District can he point to? Because we are also continuing to struggle in this part of West Virginia, and it's hard to really think of any signature accomplishment other than getting reelected that Congressman McKinley has. So I think he's worried about Ralph Baxter.
Also, in addition to the congressional race, of course, there's a lot of local delegate races, Senate race. Senator Ryan Fearns is up for re-election. No one's announced they're running against him yet. the filing period, people may not understand, ends the end of January. So this month, somebody's either have to decide, I'm running as a Republican challenger, which is unlikely, or someone's going to run the Democratic side, which is likely, but nobody's thrown their hat in the ring yet.
That's true. That's true. And Ryan Fearns has certainly consolidated a position for himself there in the West Virginia Senate. He's gotten to the position of majority leader, which makes him a difficult person to take on, particularly because in that position, he gains a lot of out-of-state money. Once you are in the leadership of the chambers, you gain out-of-state money and support from the Republican National Committee and so forth that can then pour into your race. So we may find that people who don't live in this senatorial district here covering Wheeling and North, the rest of the Northern Panhandle, are trying to decide for us who the senator is going to be, and they're going to be firmly in the camp of Senator Fearns. But who his challenger will be remains unknown.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you being on the show here today to talk to all of our viewers about some of these political issues that have been happening in 2017 or have happened, and will be maybe what to look for in 2018. And always good to have you on the show, and good to see you here, especially in the new year.
We'll be watching, Jamie. Thank you.
All right,
Happy New Year.
Appreciate it. We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll be talking sports. We'll talk a little bit about the NFL playoffs, the college bowl season that's just been, and the college football championship game. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
We've been doing business with WTRF for over 25 years.
We've been in business almost 20 years. We've been advertising with WTRF for almost 7 years.
Definitely would recommend this to any business trying to get advertising out there because it does work.
Commercials are a natural part of the television viewing experience. Local businesses need your support to be able to stay and grow in our communities.
It's worked out very well for us.
It works, it gets results, and it's easy.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports. I'm going to start with the NFL playoffs. And let's first talk about how it works. In the NFL, the teams are seeded. The 4 divisional winners get the top 4 seeds no matter what their records are in order of the best record to the worst. So division winners get 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there are 2 wild card teams that get the 5th and 6th seeds, even if one of them has a better record than one of the division winners. So 1 through 6 seeds. The first 2 seeds get a bye in the first round, and then 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5. The interesting thing is that for the second round, number 1 plays the worst remaining seed. So it's not bracketed like you might think in a lot of tournaments or sports. Instead, number 1 sits there and waits for the worst seed that's left. So it could be the 6th seed, could be the 5 seed, could be the 4 seed. You just don't know. Number 2 then gets the worst remaining seed after that. So the Steelers are the number 2 seed sitting here in the AFC, won't know who they play until after this weekend's games are played. The Steelers could get the number 3 seed in Jacksonville. They could get the number 4 seed Kansas City. They could get the number 5 seed in Tennessee. Excuse me. Who they won't get is number 6 Buffalo Bills. If Buffalo should happen to win this week, they will be, by virtue of being 6th, the worst remaining seed, and they will certainly go to number 1 New England. So let's talk about what may happen this week. First of all, I think that Jacksonville gets it done against Buffalo. The Bills happy to be in the playoffs for the first time since really the millennium. I know my good friend Chris Regan, who was on the show today, will be disappointed to hear me say that. He's a Bills fan from Rochester, New York originally, but the Bills are just happy to be there. They're not going to get a win. The Jacksonville defense is just too good. I think the Jaguars get it done against the Bills. I think Kansas City beats the Tennessee Titans. You know, Andy Reid's been there a number of times. Last year, Alex Smith and crew, lost to the Steelers, eliminated from the playoffs. But this year, I think they win in their opening playoff game and they advance on to where they'll face New England as the worst remaining seed. Kansas City being the number 4 seed will go to New England, and Jacksonville as the number 3 seed would go to Pittsburgh in week 2. I think the Steelers get it done against Jacksonville. Of course, Ben already talking about how he's looking for revenge. He threw 5 interceptions, a career high, in that early season meeting against Jacksonville this year. I think the Steelers will beat the Jacksonville Jaguars to advance the AFC Championship game, where they'll face, of course, the New England Patriots, who have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. They'll beat the Kansas City Chiefs and then host Pittsburgh in the AFC Championship game, where I think Ben, a healthy AB, Le'Veon Bell, and the rest of the crew surprise everyone, get it done, beat New England in Foxborough to advance to Super Bowl 52. Let's talk about the NFC. Before the year started, I said it would be Pittsburgh versus Green Bay in the Super Bowl. Mid-season, when Aaron Rodgers got hurt, I said change my pick. Won't be the Packers now. Rodgers is going to miss too many weeks, and I switched up to the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to stick with the Panthers, my mid-season pick. I don't like to switch midstream. I only made the switch from the Packers because of Rodgers, their star quarterback, being hurt. So I'll stick with the Panthers. They started off the playoffs this week with getting a road win over the Saints in New Orleans. I like the Rams to beat the Falcons because the Rams have that home field advantage. And my son Luke, who's 6, loves the Rams because he loves former Mountaineer Tavon Austin. So I'll take the Rams by virtue of having the home field, and my son Luke with a little bit pulling my heart that way. And then I think that the following week, Carolina goes into Philadelphia and upsets the number 1 seeded Eagles, who are without Carson Wentz, their quarterback who tore his ACL. Foles is a very suitable backup and has played well, but I just don't think it's enough to get it done. I think Carolina, with the experience of being in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, Cam Newton will play well, I think, and the Panthers beat Philly in Philly. And then I think the Vikings beat the Rams. The Vikings will be rested, have a couple weeks to prepare. I think the Minnesota Vikings get it done, and it'll be Carolina versus Minnesota in the NFC Championship game in Minnesota, where I think Carolina goes into there, beats the Vikings to prevent the Vikings from being the first team in history to have home field advantage in the Super Bowl. There are teams that have played in their own cities, but no one's ever played on their home field before. The Vikings have a chance to do that. That's where the Super Bowl will be played this year, but I don't think it happens. I think Carolina beats the Vikings to end their trip, and the Panthers go on to Super Bowl 52, where they will lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers get that 7th trophy for number 7. I think Ben Roethlisberger raises that trophy and retires, much like Jerome Bettis did after winning the Super Bowl number 40 in his hometown of Detroit. I think Ben gets number 7 for the Steelers and hangs it up from here. So I think it'll be an exciting offseason. Injuries always play a big part in the NFL. You don't know what's going to happen there. Of course, Antonio Brown out for the Steelers right now. Hopefully he'll be healthy. He's been working out on the treadmill, getting ready to go. Hopefully by the time they play, next week he'll be ready to go, because obviously a game changer at that wide receiver position. So they'll need him back, but Juju Smith-Schuster has really been coming on strong in both the receiving game and with special teams. Martavis Bryant finally starting to pick it up a little bit, but the Steelers need a healthy AB in order to make that run all the way to the Super Bowl, which I think they'll have. So I'm going to stick with Steelers over Panthers in the Super Bowl, just like I did mid-year. We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll be talking college football and some changes I think that need to be made into the college football playoff system. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
They call me Prince like I'm royalty or something. But the places I've lived ain't no palaces. So I don't need grilled salmon or a new scratching post. Just give me a cardboard box and a can of tuna and we're good. You can even change my name. I'm cool being the kitty formerly known as Prince.
Looks like it's done.
Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So learn the right temperature to cook each type of meat. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
Welcome back to the show. Let's talk college football. And of course, the college football playoff semifinals occurred this week, and Georgia with a really spectacular win over Oklahoma, double overtime and blocked field goal to add to their cause there in double overtime. But I really thought Oklahoma had some conservative play calling there late in the game. You've got Baker Mayfield, the Heisman Trophy winner. You're a high-powered offense. I just didn't like some of the play calling. I would like to have seen Oklahoma open it up a little bit. I said before this year started that Oklahoma wouldn't make it to the playoff because of the little bit of inexperience at the head coaching position of Lincoln Riley, and they got to the playoff, much to his credit. But I think that inexperience started to show a little bit there late in the game. I would have liked to have seen them open it up more. They didn't, and I think maybe they paid for it a little bit by not using the talents that they had on their offense. But so instead, Georgia advances to the championship game where they'll face Alabama, who won in somewhat of a boring game against Clemson. I mean, Alabama's defense was spectacular, but I thought Clemson was really sloppy, didn't help themselves in a lot of ways, and not the game. The New Year's Day games were great up to that point. You had the Notre Dame last-minute win over LSU. You had the big win by UCF over Auburn late in the game. The Michigan-South Carolina game was close. Then we get to this game everybody was looking forward to, Alabama-Clemson, the last two teams to win the national title and faced each other in those games nonetheless, and just really not much of a game. But now they're in the playoff. And I think this playoff needs to be changed. We're at a 4-team playoff, and we just saw UCF, the University of Central Florida, beat Auburn to finish the season undefeated. Now remember, Auburn is the same team that beat Alabama in the regular season. Auburn's the same team that beat Georgia in the regular season, and those two teams are going to face each other in the championship game. We're going to have Alabama versus Georgia, and UCF beat a team that beat both of them and is undefeated, and they're not going to get a shot. I know they don't play the same type of schedule, but you do have a team like that every once in a while that maybe could just jump up and is special and can get it done. I'd like to see an 8-team playoff at a minimum. I think 8 would be right. I would automatically give the winners of the 5 major conferences a bid. They all get in. The Big Ten, the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, the Pac-12. They all get a berth. And then 3 wild card spots. And as part of that wild card, I would make it that any other team in any other conference that's undefeated automatically gets a berth. If you win all of your games, at least give them a chance to show what they can do. You've done everything that's been asked of you throughout the year. Every team that was on your schedule, you defeated. You should get an opportunity to show we are the best team in the country. Let's go to 8th, give all 5 conferences a chance to always be in, so we don't have this, well, they played this schedule, they played this. Give an undefeated team a shot and then give 2 more wild cards, because there are years where teams from 2 teams from a conference should get in, like this year. Alabama and Georgia both have shown they're probably 2 of the best teams in the country. They're going to be in the championship game, so fine, let's have those wild cards there. But I don't like it. I like to have seen UCF and what they could do. Would love to have seen them play for the title. Not going to happen. Instead, it's Alabama versus Georgia. A matchup that Alabama's defense, which has been decimated by injuries throughout the year, but is still strong. And you've got Georgia, who's really balanced, a really solid defense, and those great runners in Sonny Michel and Chubb, a quarterback, a young freshman who's doing really well. I'll take Alabama in this game because of the experience of Nick Saban. He's been there so many times, going against his former defensive coordinator, Kirby Smart. He's been there as a coordinator, not as a head coach, though, and I think the mentor gets the best of his former defensive coordinator. I'll take Alabama to win in a close one. I hope that you enjoy the game. Hope you enjoyed today's show. We'll see you again next week on the Jamie Bordas Show.